So just before we begin looking at the sequences in the Motorcycle Diaries, I think that it should be noted that in regards to this statement made by Cohan and Hark, their study is made on the basis of the relationship between the US and the road movie, not specifically in Latin America. However, I do believe that while looking at the tensions and historical moments in Latin America, there are strong references, especially in the film, that display the histories of the past, present, in production. Not only does this form of biopic enable us to note the historical relevance into which the film was being produced in 2004, but we can also see this progression, development, and the social changes within the time frame in which it is set in 1952. I quote Walter Sayers when he said in the 2004 Cannes Film Premiere Festival, he says, "Ever since the checks were made for the possible shooting sites, we realised that in the two diaries which were written in 1952, that they still seemed to describe the Latin America that you can see today." So in this video commentary, I'll be exploring what has caused this standstill and also looking at the relationship between the cinematographical techniques in context, describing and capturing themes such as the land conflicts, migration, labour, distribution of wealth, and the rights of the indigenous people in Latin America before and after the time of production of the film.
Ella dice que nunca ella ha conocido escuela ni colegio porque siempre ha estado al lado de los ganados y por eso no sabe hablar castellano, solamente quechua. Desde que he crecido, a lo menos antes, alcanzaba a mi manera de pensar para todo su plata, pero ahora hay creo poca plata y no hay trabajo, con todo eso creo que está afectando más y más, pero ahora desde chiquitito he trabajado con artesanía y por eso estoy todavía no tan bajo ni tan alto, estoy así en nivel regular. Apus alcantai, sí. Apus asewaman salcantai.
So I think that one of the most interesting things about this scene is the fact that there's no script, and the Cusco women nor the young boy aren't actors. Even our protagonists here aren't acting. I mean, yeah, they're adopting this role, but there's like a real authenticity in the way that the Cusco women are just looking at two regular men here, regardless of whether it's Fusa or Gael Garcia Bernal. They don't see that we're envisioning, as an audience, Fusa or Che Guevara. They are just seeing two men, and there isn't this idealisation over Che here either, or romanticism. So it just makes it so real, and really makes us imagine that this is the way that it could have happened. I think that the use of the fly on the wall style, sort of over the shoulder, high and low angles, creates this intimacy, just sort of as if the cameras weren't even there. On an alternative note, however, we could argue that here perhaps there's this fetishization of the exotic, so it kind of makes us question what purpose is this being filmed. Is it for a global audience to kind of marvel at this other exotic, or is it to open up a deeper knowledge to the true indigenous Peru, and the way in which Fusa and Alberto travelled it and the way it affected them? I think as well the most significant message in context in this scene is what's being translated into Castilian from Quechua. So I'd say it's interesting to note how also the emancipation of women and the women's feminist movement in Latin America still hasn't really affected the indigenous women. There's sort of a real timelessness here. And this problem with, for example, the indigenous woman is talking about how she's never been to school and she can only speak Quechua is because she's always sort of had to be near the cattle. And this is just still going on today. In a documentary by UNICEF, La Escuela del Silencio, it said that women that are working for the family, they have to contribute to the family income and they can't attend schools. And they have the problem of becoming pregnant at a young age. According to UNICEF, in the Amazonian areas, 25% of 15 to 19-year-olds get pregnant, and that was a figure that was taken in 2012. And these women as well, they face abuse. And it just goes to show how after, over half a century later, these women aren't actors because this is still going on today. And they haven't been able to kind of keep up with the progression that other parts of Latin America have been able to access in terms of a postmodern society.
Estuve produciendo todos los productos así y me votó.
¿Lo votó de qué manera? ¿Cómo llegó la policía?
Sí, trajo policías, es que como es de plata él, tiene dinero bastante. Quiere que yo abandone su terreno, ¿no? Dejarlo.
Sí.
Una vez que ya estaba produciendo.
Sí, porque ya estuvo todo produciendo trigo, maíz, papa, aguas, todo. Él se ha quedado con cierta parte. Así es que no me quedo atrás, yo tengo que ir siempre adelante, trabajando, buscando así dinero para educar a mis hijos.
¿Cuántos hijos tiene usted?
Yo tengo 5 hijos.
¿Y usted se ha organizado con algunos campesinos de la
Sí.
zona para hacer algo?
Sí, porque entre comuneros somos organizados, nos ayudamos así, trabajamos nuestras chacras, así entre nosotros nos ayudamos.
So again, the use of this road movie genre enables us a real sense of freedom in which our protagonists can kind of roam, and it enables them to talk to the natives in an authentic way, which is evident here. And in this way, it's through the voice of the people that we recognise the importance of these tensions and the repercussions of a deteriorating political system and economic system, especially towards the agricultural system. And again, the use of the over-the-shoulder angle that's just a bit above eye level shows that the relationship between the two, they're stood quite close to each other, they've only just met. It evokes empathy and again creates this intimacy. And as we're so close up, it enables us to see this emotion in the native indigenous man's eyes. Again, this is such a politically significant sequence and a really important part of the film, as Fuser and Alberto have met Dr. Peche, who was actually part of the Peruvian Communist Party in 1928, I believe. And he's the one who suggested that they read some more books, such as the 7 interpretive essays on Peruvian reality. And this one's by Jose Maria Tegui, in which looks into Peru's social and economic situation from a Marxist perspective. And inevitably, this leads us to kind of see the journeying in which shapes Che into his Marxist and communist thinking as a leader. And here we have, this black and white image. It's not the first time that we see these moving images, and it gives us the idea that they're stills, but actually they're not. They're just shots that have been steadied and they linger for 2 or 3 seconds, and it creates a realness, the images that come alive. And they've been placed in the film accompanied by the guitar, and we tend to see this pattern that happened sort of after one of Che's realizations or pensive thinking. And the shot of Che is juxtaposed in between 2 of the stills, and this continues to alternate. And I believe that it's used to show us that while Che is reading, he's thinking of the people that he's met previously. It also forces us to recognise the history of these people, and the reference to which he made at the very beginning of the film, saying that he wants to explore the world instead of reading about them in books. And this is exactly an example of this. He's simultaneously reading while recognising the human experiences he's now achieved that enable him to kind of think of these experiences and what's touched him. I think there are so many impactful outcomes that come out of the black and white stills, or the moving images rather. It kind of solidifies the form of documentation, reminding us that these are real people, this really happened, and it creates a sense of nostalgia, the fact that it's black and white, embarking on the humanisation of people. These aren't just people that should be viewed as exotics. These are everyday people that have really gone through all these things in history. Just adds to the authenticity of the whole film.
Conclusiones demasiado rígidas. Tal vez. Pero ese vagar sin rumbo por nuestra mayúscula América me ha cambiado más de lo que creí. Yo ya no soy yo. Por lo menos no soy el mismo yo interior.
So this scene is towards the end of the film, in which we have the final reflection of Che's development, and how he's just simply grown internally as a result of the countries that they've visited, and not only that, but mostly it's the people that have touched him. And the low shot lens level just below Alberto's eyes reveals the natural sunset in the sky behind him, the subtle low lighting that sort of enriches this moving reflection visually. The final establishing shot as well, watching the plane fly off into the distance. It totally recognises the poignancy, and metaphorically how it's kind of enclosing on the chapter of their journey, geographically, but also the journeying that they have pursued in order to become who they are. For example, with Che, the leader that he comes into being. And again, I think that this shot really recognises the poignancy and the importance in the memory of these events. So the use of the juxtapositioning of this double shot of Alberto as a young man and then the real Alberto in an extreme, close-up shows this transition. And the way that he's positioned as well, it looks back to the painful times of Latin America's history, in between these lost decades. It makes it impossible for us not to recognise that this is the same person. The close-up only strengthens and identifies this, as the older and real Alberto Granada is placed in the exact same location. So we see this parallel of looking at the plane. And again, it not only reminds us of Che's death, his inability to be present in that moment, but I'd also say that it metaphorically looks back to the death and the loss and the pains that Latin America has faced. And so overall, I'd just like to conclude by saying that while this film is in the production of the early 2000s, this scene completely witnesses and recognises the past, and as a whole it encapsulates the memory, the struggles, the histories and the distances, metaphorically and geographically, that still haven't changed for some Latin American countries, and especially so in terms of the rural areas inhabited by the indigenous natives. And so if in fact this does adopt the genre of being this road movie, it kind of breaks the conventions in this way, as it becomes more of a lean towards the form of a memoir, or the film version, the biopic, and becomes a form of authentic documentation, breaking from the fictional, because it reminds us of the true historical events, for example, by including the real Alberto Granada. And so just to conclude, the director, Walter Salles, said that this wasn't a film to be conjugated in the past tense, but belonged very much in the present. And so I kind of agree with this. I believe that here it's been a narrative discourse and recognition over the 50 years of the past that has now enabled other global audiences and international audiences to recognise the lives that are still facing the repercussions of dictatorships and political powers in Latin America today.